tsunami of a lifetime is coming, and nothing your elders have seen is going to prepare. There's no good advice to give that's specific. Let's put it this way. One of the things people tell me about their moving from one city to another, I have a phrase that nobody likes, which is every place is over. Oh, I'm moving to Austin. Yeah, it's over. Miami, it's over. Nashville, over. All these places are over. And every occupation that is named is over. I'm going to be a dentist, radiologist, accountant, teacher. These are all over. Whatever's coming, get flexible, get good. Get good on a bunch of different stuff. Learn how to think across disciplines. I have no idea what's going to be left for us.
Nobody really wants to buy our debt. And the real danger at this point is that the Chinese, who have been in a measured way shedding our debt, in other words, offloading treasuries, they could suddenly accelerate that with terrible consequences for us. They're not the only ones. We look at Japan. That's a good example of what could happen to us. I think Luke Roman is right. I don't think there are any easy answers, but you need a government that is led by people who, first of all, recognize the problem, understand there's no quick fix, and secondly, are prepared to tell the truth. Because the American people haven't heard the truth for a long time. They really haven't. And most Americans think, oh, everything's fine. As long as I can buy a six-pack of beer, put it on the back of my bike, or throw it in the trunk of my truck, go home, watch the game on Monday nights, pick up a burger, what's the problem? Well, that's the beauty of fake money. When you don't have sound money, you just print and you print and you print. But in the meantime, the house that you paid $11,000 for in 1970 now is $50,000. The car is now 20 times more expensive. All these problems are hitting. So people are beginning to feel it, but not to the point where they're ready to go into the streets with pitchforks and torches. That's coming. And they're going to need answers. They're going to want answers. They're going to want a government that responds. That's one of the reasons that FDR did many of the things he did, even though at the time it wasn't clear that it would work. He said, people have to believe that we care. They have to see action. Well, this time around it's going to be even tougher. And I don't have an easy answer, but what we've been doing with these tariffs is hitting a lot of friends over the head. And it hasn't helped us very much.
Bond buyers, the people who lend money to the U.S. government, are demanding more compensation. They're pricing in risk. What risk? The risk that the U.S. cannot service its debt. The risk that inflation returns. The risk that the dollar loses value. When bond buyers lose confidence, they demand higher yields. They require more interest to offset the risk of holding U.S. debt. And right now, that loss of confidence is visible. The bond market is telling you something the Fed won't admit. The U.S. fiscal situation is unsustainable. And cutting rates doesn't fix it, it makes it worse. Because lower rates encourage more borrowing, more spending, larger deficits. And bond buyers see the spiral. They see the $36 trillion debt growing $2 trillion per year. They see unfunded liabilities exceeding $100 trillion. They see a government that cannot cut spending and cannot raise taxes enough to close the gap. So they demand higher yields. And when yields rise, debt service costs rise, which increases the deficit, which requires more borrowing, which demands even higher yields. It's a feedback loop, and it's accelerating. Signal 2, collapsing foreign demand for U.S. treasuries. For decades, the U.S. relied on foreign buyers to finance its debt. China, Japan, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, they bought treasuries. They recycled trade surpluses into U.S. bonds. This system worked because the dollar was the reserve currency. Everyone needed dollars for trade. So they held treasuries as reserves. But that's ending. China's treasury holdings peaked at $1.3 trillion in 2013. Today they're at $780 billion. That's a 40% reduction. They're dumping. Japan, the largest foreign holder, has $1.1 trillion in treasuries. But they're not adding. They've been flat for 3 years. And with the yen weakening, with the Bank of Japan intervening to defend the currency, Japan is selling treasuries to raise dollars. They're not a reliable buyer anymore. Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states used to recycle oil revenues into treasuries, petrodollar recycling. But oil is now traded in yuan, in rupees, in other currencies. The petrodollar system is fracturing, and Gulf states are diversifying. They're buying gold, real estate, infrastructure, not treasuries. The result? Foreign demand for U.S. debt has collapsed. In 2023, foreign buyers purchased $200 billion in treasuries. In 2024, only $50 billion. That's a 75% decline. So who's buying? The Federal Reserve. They're forced to step in to be the buyer of last resort. Because if no one buys U.S. debt, if Treasury auctions fail, the system collapses.